Hello, folks, and good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're calling from. My name is Dr. Joanne Yanez. I'm the Executive Director for the Association of Accredited Naturopathic Medical Colleges, and I am excited to welcome you to today's webinar that is part of our virtual fair series. This is our Ask an ND panel. So everything you wanted to ask, or maybe didn't even know you needed to ask, today is your chance. So we have with us a panel of naturopathic doctors from the accredited member programs of AANMC with us today to share their journeys, share some of their challenges, and a little bit of their advice. So stay tuned and we will start to get to the webinar. But before we do, just a little bit of housekeeping. We do ask that attendees use the Q&A button. So look down on your Zoom screen and find the Q&A button. And we do ask that you use that for any questions during the course of today's webinar. It just helps us keep tabs on questions a bit better. However, right now, if you would be so kind as to put in the chat, where are you calling from? So where are you in the world right now? And so if you want to throw that into the chat and just let us know where you're calling from, that would be fabulous. So just as a disclosure, this webinar is just educational. There's no continuing ed as part of today. And the speakers that do participate in our events are voluntary. They're not paid to be here. So next slide. So with that, we're going to start the show. So we have with us graduates from the various different programs today. With us from Bastyr is Dr. Chang, from CCNM, Dr. Peters, from NUHS, Dr. Fiedler, from NUNM, Dr. Ray, and from Sonoran, Dr. Turner. And so I am going to basically just jump in here and start chatting with our panelists. Dr. Turner, I'll start with you. You're the first square on my Brady Bunch screen here. So could you tell us about your background and your journey to becoming an ND, and how did you know that it was the right thing for you?
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I grew up in a tiny, tiny town out in the middle of nowhere where we really only had a health food store and an acupuncturist. So right off the bat, I knew I was interested in natural medicine. And I actually checked out the naturopathic colleges in high school. And so I was really lucky. My dad told me about naturopathic medicine. And so right off the bat, I was a horse to the barn. I did my undergrad at UC Santa Cruz. I interviewed at all the schools. I was done with the Pacific Northwest fog, so came out to Arizona, and now I'm living on the surface of the sun, and I miss the Pacific. But I do love my journey. I graduated from Sonoran, which used to be Southwest College, in 2007. I did a 2-year residency. And then I worked in another doctor's office for 9 years. And then I jumped off the cliff and started my own business in 2016. And I now have a thriving center with 5 other doctors and my own resident. And I absolutely love it.
Thanks so much. Dr. Peters.
Yeah, welcome everyone, and thanks for having me. Before I was a naturopathic doctor, for about a decade or so, I worked in the health food store industry in Calgary, Alberta. And now I live in BC on the Pacific Northwest on Vancouver Island. And I was working in the health food store industry for a long time, doing various different things there. I, at the same time, became a registered holistic nutritionist through the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and also taught there for a number of years. And so the nutrition kind of realm was in my periphery and my everyday for many years. And then at some point, I was outgrowing the health food store industry, and also felt like I wanted more tools in order to kind of help the folks that I was helping in some way nutritionally. And I was also kind of searching for something, what did I want to do as a career for the rest of my life? What are the pieces that would make me happy? And I essentially made a list of what those pieces were and what different career options would get me there. And certainly naturopathic medicine was kind of on the radar anyway. And I knew I wanted those tools and kind of wanted to go deeper with folks. And so I did, and ultimately spent my 30s becoming trained to become a naturopathic doctor. And I don't know at the time that I knew that becoming an ND was the right decision. I knew that there were pieces that I wanted to fit into my everyday life that would bring about a sense of joy and purpose for me. And naturopathic medicine was one of those options. And I'm sure there's multiple universes of me doing different things, and this is the one I'm in. And so far it's a complex journey, but I certainly love it.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Ray.
Alafia, everybody. I'm happy to be here. And my path to becoming an ND was quite winding. I typically tell people the short of it is it really was divine intervention that got me to this point. When as a child, I always knew I wanted to be a doctor. I had a Fisher Price kit. I always used to like playing doctor on everybody. Everyone had a boo-boo. I always would give them a Band-Aid and take care of them. So that caregiver spirit was already born within me and activated. And then throughout high school and college, I knew I wanted to be pre-med. I did pre-medicine in college, but at that time, I grew up in the hills and mountains of Central Virginia. So I did not have a blueprint that naturopathic medicine existed. I didn't know of any NDs. I did have my ancestral medicine practices where, we grew up in the Appalachia, so we still did lend to nature. I spent a lot of time in nature and we did natural remedies through that. But otherwise, I didn't know about this career path. And so I was being pushed into the conventional medicine setting through my advisors to become an MD or a DO, through family members being in and out of hospitals and having poor health. I got firsthand experience at a very early age, traumatizing experience of how the conventional healthcare system does not always align with treating people the way that they deserve and should be treated. And then, of course, coming from an African-American community, there's disparities and a lot of heaviness with that as well. So I started switching from the conventional path and was thinking if I was going to do it, I would do DO. I tried to apply and get into DO school, took the MCAT, did all of that, and made it to the end only for someone in one of the DO schools I was looking at to actually be bold enough to tell me, why are you here again? And I gave this beautiful flowery response of how I wanted to heal and help people heal naturally and blah, blah, blah. And she flat out said, this is not what we do here. And said, I think you're in the wrong place. So I was crushed. And that made me not want to pull the plug on going that route. I spent 3 years in my own self-discovery and limbo, and was going to go into the Peace Corps, and made it through that process, was about to get my assignment for the Peace Corps, only to then realize, well, what am I going to do when I get out? I mean, this is 2 years, so what's going to happen next? And so then I finally was like, let me get online. At the time, Google was around, y'all. And was able to do an internet search. And I literally put in the terms of the topics and the interests I had at the time. I was already a vegetarian. I was already into the raw movement and healing naturally. So I knew nutrition and natural herbs and healing. What is available if I do that? Boom. AANMC. In its earlier years at that time, website popped up. It had a video, and it's first time in my life I learned about naturopathic medicine. And so once I learned about it and saw that this was a real field of medicine, that nowhere did anyone tell me this existed and that this was possible, I pumped the brakes on the Peace Corps to my recruiter's chagrin. He was not happy about that. And then I went ahead and applied to one school because when I looked at the location, I'm like, I'm like an orchid. I'm kind of moody in where I like to live. And so Portland seemed that there was no Bastille in California at the time. So, NCNM was the name of it, the National College of Natural Medicine, now in UNM. I'm like, okay, Portland it is, let's go. Applied, I got in, and I never looked back ever since. So that was back in 2011 that I got in. I graduated 2015. And then I went on to do a residency, and then I went on to start my own private practice. I've been in private practice for the last 6 years. And yeah, I do think it's, how did I know becoming ND was the right decision? Because it didn't feel like any other path fit. And I really do feel like the universe has a way of just plopping what you're meant to do right in front of you. It's whether you're brave enough to take it or not. So here we are.
Thank you for sharing. So next square is Dr. Fiedler, please.
Hi there. So kind of similar to Dr. Ray in some aspects. My dad's an MD, so I always considered that I was going to go into medicine. It was in my family and other family members too. And I was really excited about it at first, but then in my own undergraduate training, dealt with chronic illness myself and had to take a leave of absence. And that's when I got really thrust into the conventional medicine system and just had every bad reaction and saw so many intelligent doctors unable to give me options. And I thought, gosh, well, if I do get well, I'm definitely not going into this field because I don't want to be you. Like this is horrible. And it really marked me. And then so I finished up studying psychology. I thought I'd go more a clinical counseling route. Did not know yet about ND, but part of who helped me heal was an acupuncture physician because I'm located here in Florida. And so Chinese medicine was still sticking in my mind. And so when I looked to study Chinese medicine, I was like, wow, this is what helped me get well. Like there's so much here. I want to study this. But I couldn't let go of the fact that my dad did not understand any of the language of what I would learn as a Chinese medicine practitioner. And so that got me searching for how can I be the bridge? Like how can I understand and learn all the same pathology and terminology, but be able to translate? Because the last thing a chronically ill person needs is the burden, the responsibility of translating between their providers. And so that's what led me to discover ND as an option too. And I ended up choosing the National University of Health Sciences because I could do my master's in acupuncture. I did go on to do my Chinese herbals too after, but the fact that I could do my master's in acupuncture and my ND in 6 years was very attractive to me. And so, because I knew I wanted to do both. And so that's what made me, after college, apply and move and go there. And then once we decided my husband and I, who I met at school, once we decided we were going to move back to Florida, where I'm from, I did my master's in Chinese herbals because I have to do that to practice here in Florida to be an acupuncture physician. So.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Chang.
Yeah, so I originally grew up in California, and my parents had a Chinese restaurant, and most of our ailments were kind of taken care of with food and at home. Because they were first generation immigrants, there was kind of a fear to go see a doctor due to kind of costs and also the language barrier. So I feel like growing up, there was already this disconnect between just watching my parents and their doctor-patient relationships. So I wanted to seek out something that was more hands-on, and I had a great experience with a physical therapist. So I was like, in undergrad at Davis, I was like, I'm going to do PT. That's my goal. And I did everything. I got a bunch of internships, shadowed a lot, and also did a part-time job as a PT aide. And by doing that, that really got me involved in exploring the physical therapy realm. And it also made me realize what I didn't like about it, just the red tape in some way with insurances, limitations on talking about medications and other things going on at home. So I felt like I was kind of stuck. I was like, do I really want to go here? And it just so happened the physical therapy clinic I was working at, there was a naturopathic doctor referring patients to us. And so I hit him up, and he was a Bastyr grad, asked to shadow him. And just day one, I knew exactly this was the career I wanted. One of my favorite memories is, he had a nurse in the clinic, but he was the one getting the patients from the waiting room and taking their blood pressure and getting their vitals. And I asked him why he was doing that versus, typically you've got the nurse or MA kind of setting that up. And his answer just like won me over. And he was saying that, his relationship with that patient was starting right when he called their name from the waiting room, how they stood up and how they shook his hand, how they were talking to him, and the vibe that you would get just by getting their blood pressure. Everything was starting from that moment. And that was the relationship I wanted. And so here I am. I graduated from Bastyr. I now work in Seattle in a private practice with 6 other doctors, and really enjoying it.
Thank you. So tell the folks, what do you love about your practice, your patient population, kind of how you landed with what you're doing with Dr. Turner.
Well, I could talk about this for a long time, but I'm gonna narrow this down to 2 things I think that I love the most about what I do. Number one is I really love helping people. I love holding them in a sacred space and holding that place of vulnerability where we're talking about things that are rather vulnerable and discussing with them the big picture options and then doing joint decision making and deciding what we're going to do about it. That's number one. Number two is I absolutely love the creativity that I have being a business owner. I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was when I started this. And now I feel like I'm always on fire in terms of excited about creating and designing and refining and where else can I make my systems more efficient. And so for me, that's like my art. I feel like it's my art. And the only other thing I'll say about this is that the other reason I absolutely love my job is because it is never boring.
Thank you. Dr. Peters.
There's a couple things that come to mind right off the bat. I think one of the main things that drew me to naturopathic medicine, and is still the thing I love on a daily or regular basis, are the actual modalities themselves, like the actual tools in the toolkit. If I was any other profession, it would probably be a herbalist at the end of the day. And I love using herbal medicine and concocting potions and tinctures and getting people excited about that and various forms of using herbs. And you don't think I realized the power of acupuncture until I got into school. In the Canadian schools, we have to take acupuncture. It's part of the curriculum. And in BC, where I can practice acupuncture, and I learned to love that as a tool and to see the healing, the kind of healing efforts that come from that. And so I just love the actual doing of the stuff. The other part of it that I don't think I really realized was that I kind of like bridging the conventional kind of medical model to a certain extent with these tools, and being able to help people understand where they sit, maybe medically, what that means optimally, or within a particular disease process, and kind of trying to bridge both worlds a bit. Yeah, I think that's the things that excite me the most.
Thank you, Dr. Ray.
Similarly to Dr. Turner, I really love the cultivation of the relationships. I love really building deep rapport with my patient to understand them, where they come from, how they got here. This profession really allows for you to take your time with that if you want. And then the other aspect is the way that you can just integrate, like Dr. Peters said, there's so many ways you can integrate different modalities. I do consider myself a multidisciplinary provider. There's a lot of systems I'm able to bring in to my practice to make it this unique approach that feels authentic to me. And then it also meets my patients where they're at. And then the flexibility as a business owner, as a provider, to have all these different options that you can utilize for supporting people in their health journey.
Thank you. Dr. Fiedler.
Yeah, many other things already mentioned, so I'll just add one that hasn't been. I love that this career allows me to also be home with my girls. So I have a 4.5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and the flexibility I have in like owning my own practice and getting to like be the mom I want to be in this season, but then also in my practice, helping other moms in a similar season, like struggling with health complaints for themselves or their kids. I'm in Tallahassee. The community is not super huge here. And so like I literally will find out that I'm helping like one of my girls' classmates. You know what I mean? Like it's really impactful to just see how making a difference in one person's life and their family, like how that really trickles out. And so that's incredibly meaningful to me. I also love being a translator. I love, since my dad's a medical doctor, has been a surgeon here for 30 years, I love like coming back to my hometown. And again, like a lot of people just have misunderstandings about what I do or don't do. And I love clarifying that. Like if someone's antagonistic, I don't even engage. But a lot of people are just really curious and have great questions. And so like talking to other medical providers, explaining the treatment I am providing, and like just, again, building those bridges, it's an honor to get to do that.
And Dr. Chang.
I think what I love about our profession is just how many tools we end up gathering. And in Washington State, we are primary care providers. And so I'm doing everybody's like, general wellness, their PAPs, things like that. But I'm able to also, if someone comes in for PMS, for example, I can think about, prescribing birth control, but I can also do so many other things like nutrition, talk about their lifestyle, using herbs to help regulate cycles and PMS. how they detox, all of that. So I just feel like just being in a naturopathic world, we have that flexibility and that knowledge to treat the entire person, not just that symptom. And that's really exciting.
Thank you. So I'm actually going to switch gears here just a little bit. There have been a number of questions that have come in about how you've set up your practice and the overhead, how you've chosen to create the type of practice you have. I think sometimes people don't recognize the flexibility in all of the different ways that you have the options to practice. So maybe if you can just talk about how you landed on your current practice model and how your clinic is set up, the type of staff you have. So if you could take maybe like a minute or two and just talk about your clinic model and how you work. Dr. Turner.
Yes, sorry. So I had the option of working in someone else's office for 9 years, where during those years I was learning how to do the medical part. And that was my plan. I didn't want to do the business part. So if I had to have started the business at the beginning, I personally think it would have been an incredibly challenging experience. So by the time I started my medical center, I was able to hit the ground running and mimic all of the systems that I'd already seen now work for years. So I'm going to kind of fast forward and tell you how I've done it now to answer your question. So we're a cash-based practice. We do use insurance for labs and imaging because we practice in a state where we are licensed as primary care providers, which means we're allowed to have NPI numbers and order diagnostic imaging. So this answer would obviously change if you were in an unlicensed state. I have 4 other doctors. A couple of them are employees and a couple of them are contractors, and that's a whole nother conversation. But in terms of making the business profitable, I have 2 front desk receptionists. I have an office manager. I'm trying to think about how to answer your question the best. I will say getting a financial team together to teach you how to learn about business strategies is important. Making sure you're understanding your numbers and you understand what percentage of every dollar you make is profit. Our office expenses are ranging in the 70%, 60 to 75%, which means the rest of that is getting split up as profit. So, it's definitely you need to be paying attention to the numbers and understand what's your profit margin with each of your different revenue streams. For example, we don't make as much money on IV therapy as we do on a consult, because a consultation, the overhead is just the cost of running the practice, which, yes, that's expensive because of staff and employees. Employees will be your most expensive expense, followed by rent, maybe. We also have an on-site medicinary. We do sell supplements through the online medicinary, but we'll definitely make more money with on-site sales. So I tell my doctors, any supplement that you're going to sell more than twice per month, we should stock it in office. So we have a large medicinary on-site, and probably about 1/3 of our monthly income is coming from retail sales. I'm going to leave it at that and let other people fill in the holes.
And the other thing that I would add to that is this is for sure reason to come to Dr. Turner's talk next month, where she's going to be talking all about setting up business. So I think maybe if each of you can talk just a little bit about how your practice is set up, kind of how you work, and then we can keep going. But for more questions about business, come to Dr. Turner's talk next month. So Dr. Peters.
I work in 2 different clinics actually, and one of them I'm an associate in and have been since I've been in practice. So I'm in my 4th year of practice. I joined an established naturopathic clinic. It's somewhat multidisciplinary. There's a few other folks that work in there, but I'm the only other naturopathic doctor other than the person who owns it. I'm an associate. And the nice thing about entering in that environment is all of that business side, all of that stuff was taken care of from the beginning. I give a greater percentage of the profits I make back to the clinic because of that type of contract. But it allowed me to really learn the medical naturopathic side to get on the ground running that way. And then the second clinic I work in, which is in a different city actually than I live in, is the one I own. And that's just a straight up rental. I rent a space out of a pharmacy actually, and have two nurses working for me who administer IVs. And everything there is taken care of by myself. But the overhead is relatively low other than the cost of just running a practice.
Thanks, Dr. Ray.
So I'll preface by saying that I've worked in hospitals, other private practices that were, not my own, and that even a pharmaceutical company. So prior to even getting to my own private practice, I had already about a good 12, 13 years of exposure of healthcare experience from being in different medical models. So I just want to say that because it does take sometimes some trial and error, but luckily for me, I already had quite a bit of exposure. My current practice setup is that I am a solo practitioner. I run everything. I depend on automation to really help me to streamline things so I don't have to employ an actual employee, which works out pretty well. I also have quite a bit of a self-service setup for my telemedicine practice. So currently I'm remote. I do telemedicine. I used to have a brick and mortar and see patients in clinic, but I have transitioned to being telemedicine because now I'm bi-coastal. I'm licensed in California and I'm also licensed in New Hampshire. So I see people coast to coast and work with them. And so this has been how I run my practice, and it's set up in a concierge style model. So my patients will enter into like a membership subscription with me model. They pay a certain amount a month and they get a certain amount of benefits, doctor and retainer, so to speak. I also have wellness programs where I'm able to, really cater and support them. And then online courses, classes, online supplement access shop. And then I make my own products and do my own formulary as well, and compounding where I ship across the different people. So as you can see, there's a lot of different flexibility and integration there.
Thanks for sharing, Dr. Fiedler.
This whole discussion is just reminding me how much I love how different we're all NDs, but it just can look so different. So my husband is an ND as well. He got his DC ND and I'm an NDAP. So that's how we both can practice in Florida, because Florida is obviously an unlicensed state. We're practicing under those other licenses. So his dad had solo practitioner practice chiropractic in Illinois. When we were training, he worked at his dad's office and was around that a lot. My dad opened his own practice that has multiple sites now as an MD. So both our dads had that business experience. So we leaned a lot into that while we were still up there. I also I finished my acupuncture first. So I worked as an acupuncturist for 2 years for another doctor who was private practice, cash-based model in Chicago. And so I kind of like honed my acupuncture skills just working with her there. And then when we moved to Florida, we did open our own practice. But again, we had like a lot of experience with like family members and working in these other practices that had shown us that. We actually also worked, my husband and I, for doTERRA while we were in medical training. And that was actually a really interesting experience because like we did really well with that, with selling essential oils. And that like taught us a lot of business experience that we didn't know. So that, I'm not saying that has to be anyone's journey, but that was an interesting way that we got thrust into like the business side of things and just learning more about all of that. And it has come in handy so much with us establishing our practice in 2018 down here. And so that is kind of the pieces. We have 3 part-time medical receptionists. We have 2 clinical assistants who are at FSU who help with infrared sauna. And then my husband and I are the only practitioners.
Thanks, Dr. Chang.
So I am in private practice with, like I mentioned, 6 other doctors. We've got, usually have 2, residents, because we are one of the residency sites for Bastyr and the other schools. So I'm an associate and I've been here since graduating from the residency myself. Honestly, I love it. I love how I just show up, I do my job, and everything else is taken care of and streamlined. I have a new mom of 2. My youngest is 6 months. So this is all the capacity I can deal with right now. And maybe one day that will change. But I love it. I feel like I have anything I want, new toys I want. I'm a big part of, the business aspect of that, participating in that and making decisions there. So that fulfills me. And we just got this really cool laser, and I could not have afforded it myself if I had my own practice. So it's just nice to just have all the toys and to show up and do the best I can, I know how, which is being a doctor. So.
Thank you all for sharing. And I think, just to summarize, you all have different ways that you're practicing. And that is one of the things when we talk to prospective students, to students considering this career, that is one of the selling points I personally see, is that you can make this the best way for you at that moment in life. Like some of the speakers have talked about, that we have different seasons in our lives and different times and different needs and different priorities. And this is the type of career that can shift and change as you shift and change. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that, and and recognize all of the diversity that we're seeing in the different types of practices and the way that naturopathic medicine is showing up for you in each one of your careers. So thank you for sharing. So we kind of have gone off script a little bit, but I do want to ask a little bit to share your journey about how you chose your school. What were the things that were important to you as you were making that decision? And Dr. Turner.
Well, for me, it was really easy. I didn't want fog, and I was very attracted to the technological advancements at SCNM, which now are equal across the board with all of the schools. But when I first came here, Sonoran, or SCNM at the time, was the first school, I think, to have like all of their lecture notes digital. But now that's the same at all the schools. And now we're all Zoom friendly and everything. But for me, it was location and the ease with which to be able to find my notes and use technology as a tool. And I've continued that passion for technology into my business world, because it's invaluable, and it makes it so that we can practice bi-coastal and practice, have our EHR at our fingertips and prescribe. So that was why I picked Arizona.
Dr. Peters.
Yeah, because I knew I wanted to go into naturopathic medicine when I entered into my undergrad, I actually geared my undergrad to all of the different schools. So I met the requirements for any of them, because at that point I actually didn't know where I wanted to go to school. And I was open to whether that was in the States or whether that was in Canada. But being a Canadian, certainly was leaning towards one of the two Canadian schools at the time. They're now merged into one, which is the CCNM. And ultimately, I chose between the two campuses because I really liked the city of the one. That was just a great place to live. I wanted to live in Vancouver, and that's where the one campus is. And it had a much smaller class size as well. So the personal interaction between my professors and us, being class sizes of 20 or 25 or 30 or 35, somewhere in there, just meant a really kind of hands-on, close experience. And that was a big selling feature.
Dr. Ray.
Yeah, I'm trying to reflect back on that time. And I mean, there really weren't that many options. So I was already on the East Coast, and I knew I didn't want to go to Connecticut. So it was really a process of elimination that led me up to Portland, even though I wasn't really thrilled about the idea of all the rain. During the admissions process, I really just took a chance. I'm like, okay, pick one school. And I saw that they had research. They were doing the Master's of Integrative Medicine Research, which is a clinical research degree where you can do dual. Also saw that they had the certificate of natural childbirth and midwifery. So I was going to learn like advanced gynecology and obstetrics. So that was a good pulling point. And so then I just focused in on my spirit, just said, hey, just focus in on this and see what happens. And the admissions process was so lovely, the way that they spoke to me and reached out and checked in on me. I definitely wasn't like that when I was going through the conventional medical school process at all. So that spoke to me. But then when finally sealed it is when I actually flew out to do my interview in Portland. Again, I only applied to that one school. So I was just on a whim and say, okay, if it's meant for me, it's meant for me. If it's not, it's not. But when I got there, even though it was in rainy season, again, I get to the campus, I meet the admissions counselor and the interviewers and the different people, and they were just so warm and inviting and welcoming to me. And I enjoyed seeing all the trees and, and the atmosphere. At the time I was in Atlanta, and so there's a lot of trees here in Atlanta too, a lot of parks. So that spoke to me. And so I said, why not? And it all just fell into place.
Dr. Fiedler.
Yeah, mine was kind of a process of elimination too. Again, being from Florida, that West Coast was looking real far. So, and I also then was like, I mean, I don't see myself practicing out there. So I likely being from the Southeast, like I'm going to end up in an unlicensed state. And so that made NUHS even more attractive to me because it was the only school that's in an unlicensed state. So I like when I met with the professors or definitely the clinicians there, like they all had to be dual enrolled too. And I was kind of, again, exploring that whole option. And that became very attractive to me of like, okay, I know I want to do the acupuncture. They had the ability for me to do the program like ND during the day and the acupuncture at night. So like I would have classes from like 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. But again, the fact that I could do that like trimester to trimester going during the summer too was, I don't know, that just kind of fit what I was hoping to do and to not be as far away. And I'm glad I chose it because then I met my husband there. So
Dr. Chang.
So I'm from California, so I already knew I wanted to stay on the West Coast. So that was going to be NUNM or Bastyr. I interviewed at both, and it just so happened for Bastyr, I arrived on my interview day, like to one of their worst snowstorms that day. So that would have deterred me, but I think just part of that visit was spending the day with students, and I felt like that won me over. And also the ND I shadowed in California was a Bastyr grad. So I think things were just pushing towards that.
Thank you all for sharing. And one other piece that I always share with prospective students, if you are able to do it, is to visit as many campuses as you are considering. Every campus has their own energy, their own personality, and you're often going to step onto a campus and feel very quickly, yes, I can see myself here, or I don't know if I can see myself here. And so if you do have the opportunity to visit campuses, I would strongly recommend that. All of the schools maintain student for a day options where you can go and visit. So that would be my advice for anybody considering this or trying to figure out which place do I land. And then, so kind of leading from that question, the next question I have for you is, what piece of advice would you give to a prospective student considering this, / what do you wish you had known prior to starting? Dr. Turner.
Well, there's different answers to different phases of that experience. So one thing I'm just going to comment on is I think knowing at what phase of the experience are you and having your expectations being really focused on being in that phase. And I'll just expand a little bit on that. So there's the phase of going to school. For me, the biggest challenge of going to school was just the mere volume of material we were learning. You're drinking from a fire hydrant all day, every day for 4 years. And by the time you get out, you're dizzy, your head is spinning, and you're kind of like now needing to let the material assimilate. And so in the beginning, I think the most important thing is that you remember that what your job is to be a successful graduate of medical school. Don't focus on business, complicated business things that you're not going to implement in your business for another 5 years or something. Focus on where you're at. The other advice I would give is to make sure that you have strategy to maintain balance in your life. I think the 3 most important things that you're maintaining when you're in school is that you eat well, which means you need to learn how to eat well as soon as possible, which means you should find a naturopathic doctor wherever you go, work with them, have them start teaching you, experience what it feels like to actually work with someone. And if you're not happy with that doctor, find another one. You want to find ones that are mentors to you, that inspire you, that excite you, and that teach you. And then they become kind of like a colleague mentor through your whole journey. and learn how to eat well. If you don't eat well, you're going to suffer in the program. Learn how to sleep well, because I did not sleep enough during medical school. I really didn't. And looking back, I really should have prioritized it more. I was young. I was in my early 20s, and I was like out partying on Thursdays and Fridays and then cramming on the weekend. So eat well, sleep well, and move. You need to get out and move. You got to get blood to your brain. And if you can maintain those three things, and then another one I would throw in there is some sort of like either family or spiritual or community connection. Like you need some connection that's not in the textbooks and not at school. I was a rock climber, and to me, I honestly think that it saved my sanity through medical school. So know where you are, so that there's the school phase. And then when you get out, there's kind of three phases. And I'll talk more about this in the next presentation too. But there's kind of learning to walk as a doctor, and then there's learning to run, and then there's learning to fly. And knowing what phase you're in helps you kind of focus on what is it that you're trying to do, because what you're trying to do will change depending on what phase you're in. For example, you're not going to save for retirement when you're learning to walk. You just won't, because you don't have enough patients, you're not making enough money. So there's my answer to that question.
Thanks, Dr. Peters.
Yeah, I think the thing, I was inspired by health and nutrition, and naturopathic medicine seemed like a natural extension of a lot of that. And I had a mentor I was working with and was really pretty quickly sold based on what I wanted to do about what naturopathic medicine would offer. And I think the things that I kind of wish I would have known more at the time was the other hats that I would end up wearing through this process, either in school or as an MD. And whether it be the various things that I have to be doing on a daily basis that aren't just in naturopathic medicine. I don't know if knowing any of that would have necessarily changed whether I went into naturopathic medicine, but it's just important to realize the extent of what we're getting involved in, because there's a lot of business aspects and accounting or bookkeeping or ordering or kind of relationship management, and then the tools, and there's just a lot there to understand that you're going to be digging into. And I think considering that, just like really being introspective about what that means and whether that's the path one wants is a part of the process. I think that would be quite beneficial to think about beforehand.
Thanks, Dr. Ray.
So what I'm about to talk about applies to all people, but I am going to specifically speak to my BIPOC students. The statistic that I really wish I would have paid attention to and knew is that in the medical field in general, less than 6% are Black doctors. And so you're not going to see this great diversity in a lot of people that look like us. In naturopathic medicine, that's even smaller. So you're even a smaller subset. And that can feel quite isolating and lonely, even if you have a really great naturopathic medical school community and you build friends through that. There's still things that are innate in our experience and our culture and our practices that just are not going to translate in those environments. And sometimes there can be what we've called now in the professional world as imposter syndrome. And that was definitely something I had to battle with while in medical school. Like, do I belong here? There really was, I can count on one hand the number of students, including myself, that look like me. And at times there would be ways that I would be thinking through something critically, and it's part of the beauty of my culture, my spirit, and how we move, but it would not always translate in that classroom or that clinical environment that is predominated by more, white women, white men, more European style approaches. And so just remember to follow and obey your calling. You are wanted, you are needed, you are necessary. We are necessary in this profession. Do not let that imposter syndrome make you feel less than. Do not allow that to block your ability to do this work, because we need this. And considering from the history we've come from, where we were shut down from being able to practice a lot of this medicine that predates even naturopathic medicine, they actually get their roots from indigenous medicine. This is our medicine. So just know that, and that you might have to play along in medical school and play along a bit when you're in other people's practices, but always hold on to who you are and that identity, and know you can build that. You can make that. You don't have to sit at anybody's table if they don't want you there. And so that's something I really wish I had known, that I was instilled with, so I could have hopefully bypass more of that self-discovery and that very painful identity process I had to go through just to reconcile those worlds together, knowing that they can coexist, and you can feel, you can take up that space in your most authentic self. So that's what I would leave as that advice.
Thank you so for sharing that. And I just want to honor the space that you're coming from, and thank you for sharing. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion has absolutely become a huge focus for AANMC. We maintain a committee that is dedicated to this and to recruitment that better mirrors the populations that we want to see and treat. And so thank you for sharing your journey there. Dr. Fiedler, what advice would you give to folks considering this?
I would give, and this just comes because me practicing in Florida, like really getting involved in your state naturopathic associations earlier and taking that really seriously. Again, I was like, oh, I'm starting school in 2011. There's no way Florida won't be licensed by the time I'm out. Well, JK, it's still not. You know, like I feel like, so I just learned from me. That's something I really wish I would have just kept a closer pulse on. I mean, I agree with what Dr. Turner was saying. Don't overwhelm yourself with being involved in things that you don't have the space or capacity to do. You are learning so much. However, I knew I was never going to practice West Coast. And that's part of the reason I never chose to do a residency, because I was like, how is it going to serve me to do a residency if I'm going to practice in Illinois, where my husband's from, or Florida, neither of which are licensed, right? Like that didn't make sense to me. Why am I going to learn something that then I'm not going to be able to translate to the realm in which I'm practicing? So I agree with like the mentors, and I have so many of those who have similar practices in similar states. It's just really important to expose yourself and align yourself with the practice you see yourself either opening or joining. And that's so different state to state. So I really wish I would have keyed into that earlier on.
And Dr. Chang.
I feel like just starting even before applying to school and shadowing, I think that was just a game changer for me, just experiencing what the day-to-day is going to look like. For preceptor hours, you're going to have those requirements for your curriculum, but I feel like I went over the required amount of hours just because I wanted to see how people practice in different states. When I traveled during vacations, I tried out many different places, and I feel like I was able to be like, I'm not going to practice like that. It's like, oh, this is the business model I like. And so that was really huge, because ultimately that's going to be what real life is, because what you learn in school, it is kind of a bubble, right? You're getting the amazing curriculum, but the teachers teaching you they may not be practicing or things like that. So I think just getting on the ground and seeing what is out there is so helpful. And especially, I think, even trying out different states, because it's so different. And I totally feel you on the imposter syndrome. You're going to experience that. And also, you know, I think if someone's question was like, you know, the people who are skeptical of the naturopathic field, you know, because we're doing primary care here. There's literally a naturopathic doctor down the street from us. And I still get people who come in here who have been disenchanted by the conventional community. They haven't felt heard, and they're coming to us for answers. And there's always a feeling of like, oh, we're oversaturated or things like that. Like, it's so not true. I'm very busy, and there's a lot of actually, like, you know, poor information on social media. And I feel like I'm answering things like that online too, of just, we definitely have like job security. So don't worry about that.
Thank you so very much for sharing. I think the other piece that I would just add on to what the panelists talked about today is seek out mentors early, start to network, start going to conferences, call up a naturopathic doctor, see one as a patient, as Dr. Turner said, ask them to, hey, would you be willing to do a 15-minute Zoom with me? I want to hear about your journey and, what your practice is like. Like, I strongly recommend connecting with lots of different NDs early on. You can offer to be a student volunteer at a conference if you can't afford to attend yourself. Like, there's so many different ways, but I would definitely encourage early on, either as you're a prospective student and for sure once you're in school, don't wait until your fourth year to do that. One of the things that I often hear from students, and I've also heard from all of our career counseling offices at the programs, is that oftentimes students wait until the very end to start coming up with their business plans and their career plans. Do not wait. Start thinking about that early on. Start, like Dr. Chang said, seeing all of the different ways of practicing, figuring out what it is makes sense for you in your life, in your season, where you want to be at that moment in time. Learn the things you like, learn the things you don't like. And the only way to do that is to really just immerse yourself. So I would very much recommend, taking the advice of all the docs who spoke today and sharing their journeys. So with that, we're going to close up the contact slides for the various different doctors. And we have gotten a couple of questions that will this be recorded? And so we will be sending the recording out, but here is the contact information for the docs, if you can advance. And then we're going to have some upcoming webinars coming up for AANMC. So Dr. Turner will be presenting on business and financial success. We'll be talking loans, student loans, paying things back, career options, all of the things. So this is just a little primer for Dr. Turner's talk next month. And then Dr. Jonathan Beatty will be speaking about functional medicine in August. So I hope that we can see you at an upcoming event. I can stay on for the next couple of minutes and answer some more of the questions that are in the Zoom. But if you have any additional questions for us, here's the AANMC's contact information. And a huge thanks, heartfelt thanks to the speakers today, and look forward to seeing you hopefully at a conference or something in the future. And thank you to the attendees today for joining us, and hope that this was helpful for you in your journey. So with that, we're going to close today's webinar. Thanks again, everyone, for coming.